Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. Today, I have Brian Christine on with me from a channel of the same name. And he is someone that I've been following probably since like early this year. A lot of people kind of viewed like around May this year as kind of like a really high watch time as far as like the rapture goes and stuff like that. And so I came across him and just, I felt like he has like a really good spirit. And so I just wanted to bring him on and just kind of talk about some of these things. So welcome, Brian. And so so you're having a lot of fun right now. I checked in on your channel. You're doing a lot of fun things lately. Do you want to kind of like fill everybody in like with what you're currently doing on your channel?
Yeah, so people raised money. I had an idea and I felt like I wanted to connect watchmen. Are your subs familiar with the term watchman?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I felt like God wanted me to connect with other watchmen like physically. And so I just came up with something called Watchman's Journey, and it's about me traveling to meet with other watchmen and kind of just make a bunch of connections. And so I did my first leg of that journey recently, and you can tell by the mural behind, this is my home here, and the tree is pretty familiar on my channel. But yeah, I'm basically just editing down a lot of the footage that I got from my first leg, and I'm putting those out every Friday. So and I plan to do that in the future. So if I'm able to raise more money for more trips, then I'll go meet other watchmen in different parts of the country and come back and, you know, disperse the footage as we go.
I think that's a really, really good idea. Like, in fact, one of the things I wanted to ask you is like, so, you know, I'm a child of like the 80s and 90s. I don't feel like there's ever been a time, and just like looking back into history, I don't think there's been a time quite like right now where like so many people are like tuning into the fact that the second coming is close. Like, do you kind of feel the same way, or what's your experience been?
Yeah, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I'm just like not far behind you, or ahead of you, I guess. I haven't seen any time like now. It's rapid. I mean, everything, whether it's spiritual, whether it's technological, whether it's it doesn't matter what topic you pick, everything is just rapidly increasing. It's honestly, it's so fast, it's hard to keep up with. And I consider myself a pretty up to speed guy, but it's hard to keep up with.
My gosh, I know. And there's a lot of stuff, like I have a whole like list of questions here that I want to go over and just like kind of get your thoughts and stuff like that with like a lot of these like changes and developments and things that are happening in the world. But first, so how long have you been a Christian? Are you a lifelong Christian?
I would say I really got serious about walking with God and beginning to know Jesus at age 19.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been a while.
Okay. And do you have a particular denomination? Are you non-denominational?
Yeah, I don't have any denomination.
Okay. So 19, and then when did you start like getting the feeling that the time is like getting close for the second coming? Like when did you start kind of like really getting into that and noticing it?
96.
Okay. What happened?
I guess just an awakening. God just awakened me, and I also just started to see things from a prophetic view. I guess he awakened within me the understanding of the prophetic nature in my life, because I have kind of like a sense about prophecy, you know, and of course, when you start to read the Bible and you take it seriously and you've done it for a while, then you realize, hey, some of these things have come to pass, some of them haven't, and you start to make connections with the world around you, and you're like, well, it looks like some of these things are probably about to happen. So yeah, I started becoming awakened, I guess I would say.
Just like through your own, just kind of like study and then just being impressed upon by the Spirit, essentially.
That definitely, but also kind of more direct, more even direct than impressions, but like actual, sometimes I would have visions or see things before they would happen, you know, not always serious things, sometimes just mundane things, but sometimes it was serious things.
Now, I mean, are there any experiences that you can share, or are they like too sacred, or do you have like any particular key dreams or just anything that you have to share?
Well, I'll share something that hasn't happened yet, and it's always kind of perplexed me. When I was a really young boy, I would have visions and dreams about like a war scenario being all around me, and it was pretty brutal, and I was leading people, and it was more than I could comprehend at that age, you know, and that's always kind of stuck with me. I hope that it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't become real. Honestly, I'd rather be with the Lord, you know. I'd rather see the rapture happen before that, but you know, God's will, of course, right?
Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, probably in my church and then other Christian churches, I get the feeling that there are a lot of people that feel like maybe at some point there'll be war here on American soil. Do you kind of like tend to think that way based on your vision, or what do you think about that?
I'm not sure. I have like a logical side, and then I have a intuitive side. My logical side says that if we do see war in America, it's just going to be really, really fast and kind of blindsided, or maybe like allowed, you know, so that it's so devastating that it's just like there's no recovery from it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the logic that my mind comes up with. But as far as the other side of me, the intuitive side, I think I kind of get the feeling that there might be, you know, or maybe it's like just unrest, civil unrest or civil war, who knows what.
Yeah. I just, you know, I worry because I think that inherently America is a really good nation, and it has been. And I think it was a lot more humble and had better values, you know, a while ago, and like things just like keep getting worse and worse. So I just wonder if like the Lord's not going to favor America anymore as we get closer and closer to this event, to the second coming. And I definitely hope it doesn't come to that. So, but do you get the same feeling that, do you feel like America is important in these last days, or like plays a key role in anything?
I mean, it certainly has for quite some time. I think that our relevance is quickly fading as we embrace kind of as a nation foolishness. I will say that my channel started as a result of some strange events that happened one day when I had a kombucha business, and I was just at a farmer's market one day, and a strange series of events happened, and I just couldn't get it all out of my mind. And I felt like it was a message from the Lord about coming judgment, and on America specifically, and then about the coming of the Lord. So it was a very awkward video that I made. It was long-winded, and that's how my channel actually started. So, you know, that's kind of an interesting perspective there, since you're asking this question.
Yeah. And when was that? Like, when did you start it?
That was it was either June or July of 2017, I want to say.
Okay. And I think a lot of people agree that that was kind of like a really important year,
Yeah.
in many different ways. And that's like some of actually what I want to talk about. Do you tend to think that that's when the 7-year tribulation period started, or are you like a subscriber to that idea? How do you view 2017? Because that's interesting that you started it that year.
Yeah. highly significant year. I mean, just look at all of the geophysical events that happened that year. It was pretty much off the charts. All kinds of volcanoes, earthquakes, fires, all kinds of things were just breaking out, and people were kind of, even people with no biblical basis at all were kind of freaking out. They're like, is this the apocalypse? Like, what's happening? So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about the 7-year period. I have some different theories on that, but they're all different, and I couldn't really pin it down. But I would say that 2017 is absolutely really significant on the last days time chart, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I definitely tend to think so. We all know that was that the Hebrew year 5777 kind of corresponded with that year. We had the Revelation 12 sign that occurred. There was something else. I can't remember. Well, it was Trump's first full year as president as well. It's the year that we moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which, the Jews, they find that highly significant, and rightly so. It's just crazy. And another thing that happened, I did a video about this, but I have it scheduled for like a few days from now. So I won't go into too many details. It's like a video unto itself. But that was the year that you remember Oumuamua, the asteroid that came through, like an interstellar object that came through our solar system.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I realized the other day, like, that's like just another kind of like interesting thing that happened that year, because it happened in 2017. I know some people think that, like, there are some scholars, specifically one professor at Harvard, that believe that it was like a alien spacecraft or whatever. But, I don't know what I think about it, but I wonder if it could have been some kind of sign in itself, just to add to everything else that was going on that year.
Are you talking about the one that's kind of like long and skinny and has a really unique shape to it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it was definitely something to watch, right? I mean, I don't know. It had significance to me just because it was so odd. It's oddly, and I really wouldn't be surprised if we see some event in the future where, we are visited, right? And of course, there's going to be a mass deception over that, and that's I don't know if you've had discussions before on your channel about that type of topic, but
yeah, I dabble in that. Like, my channel is still relatively new. It's only like 4 months old, so
okay.
It's still new, but I'm getting into that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I've been watching it for a long time. One thing just before we move on with the Oumuamua, like, as I did my kind of like look into it, like I looked into the meaning of the name, and there's like interesting stuff there. But like the thing that kind of interests me is the constellation that it like came from, and then where it's being slingshotted to. It's going to the Pegasus constellation, which makes me think, if it's not extraterrestrial in nature, if it's like actually some kind of like sign from the Lord, it just makes me wonder, because like Pegasus, that's like a flying horse, and that's like something that we know that I don't know if like literally, but at least the book of Revelation talks about Christ coming back on a white horse. So anyway, I did a video about that, so you can check it out.
The saints are on white horses as well when he comes back, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we might have flying horses.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's also kind of like a general sense, and I'd like to, I think I already know your answer, but do you get the feeling that there's like a separation right now of wheat and tares? Like that's like
yeah.
hastening?
I would say, well, I did a video some time ago. It was probably a few years now, but it was called Jesus is Dividing Everything. And man, I couldn't have been more accurate with that video. I mean, the Lord is really dividing everything, I think a lot of people just attribute it all to Satan, which, you know, obviously that is the enemy is clearly dividing. He's the author of confusion and everything, but also, you know, nothing is done without God's permission, in the sense that it's going to bring him glory in the end. And the division that I see happening it's crazy. Like, honestly, I don't think I've seen any family untouched by division in some form since 2020. Not a single family. I can't think of anybody that hasn't been touched by division.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, for one thing, like when you look at the parable, it's like you have the tares that they're tares from the beginning, you know. I think that everyone can change. Everyone can change and accept Christ. But I think at the same time, when you look at a person's life, they kind of like are who they are. And it's like we're getting to a point where you can't mix in as easily as before. Like, you basically have to like take sides. Like, either you're going to go the way of like righteousness and good and morality, or you're going to be going like more kind of like worldly way and in like with worldly ideas. So it's like I think that lines are being drawn, and so you can't mix in anymore with the weed. You have to like go one way or another. So that's just kind of my feeling about it.
I like to think of it as we're kind of coming to a place where there's like a funnel, you know, and everybody, if there are all these different places, everybody's going to get to the point of that funnel. And at that point, it'll be the mark of the beast. And that will be the ultimate decision maker right there. That's like, that's it, right? There's no, like, once you make that decision, it's over, because you're either going to be beheaded or you're going to be eternally damned, you know?
Yeah. We're living in interesting days, and it is crazy that it really feels like we're the generation that's actually going to be seeing these scriptures come to pass after a couple thousand years. So do you okay, so kind of going back to like talking about the year 5777 and stuff like that, do you follow the Jewish feast days and all that? Do you feel like that has a lot of significance as far as like, you know, like the fall harvest and all that stuff?
Oh yeah, I follow those pretty closely, and sometimes I even practice something, you know. I don't always, but sometimes I do. And this year I did some things for at least one or two of the feasts. But yeah, I think they're really significant. And I mean, they're God's appointed feasts. You know, that's how the scriptures spell it out to us. And you know, I've had some backlash from people before where they're like, well, those are for the Jews. And I'm like, well, it doesn't really say that, you know. It says they're the Lord's appointed feasts. So Jesus and Paul both kind of clearly showed us that we don't have to do those, but there's definitely major significance in them. You know, like Paul said, they're types and shadows, right?
Yeah. It's like, you know, I'm very open-minded, and I try and like, because like some people think that Shavuot would be like a likely time for rapture, and I get more the feeling that if it was going to happen on a feast day, that it would be like one of these fall ones, either the Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, or Feast of Tabernacles, just because like I feel like Christ has already fulfilled those first four. But like, do you have like any particular feeling on that?
Yeah, I mean, if I was forced into a corner to pick an order, I would probably pick Feast of Trumpets first, and probably Pentecost second, and third would be a tie between several of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I mean, the fall feasts haven't been fulfilled yet, and I figure like either the rapture would fulfill, because the church was conceived on Pentecost, right? So it's conceivable that, pun intended, it's conceivable that it could be delivered on the same day that it was conceived. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I've always kind of looked at the Feast of Trumpets as a super high candidate because it's trumpets, right?
Yeah.
And we're called up by a trumpet, so God's trumpet.
Yeah. It's just interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it actually plays out. I think it's okay to kind of like speculate a little bit, but just like not get too caught up, just so that we don't like miss things or we don't get like too set in our ways or whatever. But I think that they're really important as well. And this was the first year. This year was the first year that I like watched any of like the services like at the synagogues. Like I was watching but for both for Rosh Hashanah and also for Yom Kippur, I watched the Park Avenue Synagogue. It's in New York, and I liked the way that they put on their services probably better than the other ones. But I had like it's even though they don't know that Christ, was the Messiah, there's just like kind of like a holiness there as you watch them do what they do, and we know that their day is coming, but it's just like it's really good to like kind of like see that and get in touch with basically what like an Old Testament people look like nowadays. And I think there's a lot of things going on in Judaism right now too, because like I'm sure that you probably watch a lot of what's going on in Israel and all that stuff. There's been a lot of stuff this year that's been happening in Israel. For example, some people might write it off as just like nothing, but like, do you feel at all that? Do you remember when there was that fire on the Temple Mount? It was done by just like fireworks. It was an accident, but it was on Jerusalem Day. Do you feel like that meant anything?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the fire that kind of filled the skies with like gloomy orangish smoke.
Oh no, that's a separate fire. So there were two fires, and they were both this year. One was like an actual fire on the Temple Mount where there was just like a tree that caught on fire. At the time, the Israelis, there was a lot of them down at the Western Wall, and they were like dancing and celebrating, and like there was like a counter protest up on the Temple Mount, and like they had fireworks and they caught a tree on fire, and it was just like this kind of crazy looking scene because you have like all these like Israelis dancing, and then up on top of the Temple Mount, like you have a fire. So that happened. But the one that you're talking about, I think you're talking about the wildfire that like cast that like really gloomy looking smoke cloud over the Temple Mount. So yeah, do you think that was significant?
Well, I mean, yeah, both of them for sure. I mean, God is constantly doing signs for Israel, and I think he always has been, and he always will be. He's just so he's involved, he's specific, and he does these little details. I mean, did you see I'm sorry if this digresses a little bit, but did you see like Yahweh's name on the wall?
Yeah, I did a video about that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just, that's his nature, he's not like forceful in his presence to man, but he's at the same time undeniable, man. His fingerprints are everywhere and on everything and in everything. And so yeah, I think those fires are significant. They happen on certain days, just like many other events,
Yeah. In fact, that wildfire, I think it actually broke out. It was at the beginning of Israel's grape harvest. And, there's like grape harvest imagery in the Bible. It's so weird. And like with those vines, right? That's another one that people like easily dismiss. Like, oh, it's just like looking at clouds and seeing what you want to see. But I don't think so with this. Like I first saw it on like, I can't remember if it was like Israel 365, but I saw it and I was like, okay, I want to like actually see if this is, does like anybody get video of it? And there's this Levite, a Kohanim or Cohen or whatever, that went down there, him and his buddy, and they videoed it. It really did happen. And it's the name, it's the Lord's name without the last letter. But I saw in another place that someone said that it was even like in the calligraphy, so to speak, with the vines, the way it was showed up. It was kind of like in a scriptural fashion, the way that you would write Hebrew in a scroll, or in, so. And then, I mean, there's so many things. What about like Naphtali Bennett? Do you have any thoughts about him?
Well, I don't know a lot about him, but I did see a video clip of him talking about 73 years and 80 years.
Yeah.
And that really blew my mind. I was like, I can't believe this guy is saying this, because it kind of was a nod to the whole fig tree generation concept.
Now, can you explain that just for like people that may not be familiar with it, what the fig tree generation is?
Yeah, so I'm hardly an expert on it. It hasn't been my topic really of focus, but it's just, I think it's based on what, Psalm 90 and a couple other scriptures where the description is God's giving is of the generation of man, how long we live. And it's tied in with the fig tree, which is Israel, according to this thought pattern. And Israel, since it became a nation in 1948, would become 80 years old at a certain point. So then people work backwards from that date and try to figure out when would the tribulation have to begin based on that end time. So I'm not sure if that like I said, I'm not an expert on this, so I probably don't describe it very efficiently, but that's
good. And it's also the part where Christ says, he makes reference to the fig tree and talking about when you, something to the effect that like all these things that he prophesied, like all these calamities and stuff like that, that's going to be the generation, that's the generation of the fig tree, essentially. All these things are going to happen within that generation. I'm slaughtering. It's like clear in my mind, but it's hard to like say.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's a lot of, that's the thing about the fig tree generation topic is it's one that's not really focused. It's like you're taking bits and pieces from several different things, but those several different things are really critical things and important things. So I tend to, I'm really looking, I think there's a good chance that will still stand. I think we still have some time left, but not a lot.
Just for fun, and we're not setting dates, but like, do you have like, what's your kind of time frame? Do you think we have 5 years, a year, 10 years? Like, what's your thoughts?
Like to the fulfillment of the full tribulation, or to the rapture, or
whatever, just what you pick.
Well, so just looking logically and scripturally, I would say I can't see things going a whole lot longer before we actually see the end. Here's one reason why. Because if you look in Genesis, I'm not sure what chapter, it might be like, well, it's about the Tower of Babel. And it says, God looked down and he said, look at what man's doing. If we don't do something about it, then, I'm paraphrasing, then nothing will be impossible for man. And technologically, I believe we're probably getting close to that right now. And we're very spiritually immature. So, and God also says that, if he did not cut the days short in the last time, no flesh would survive. And he says no flesh, he means no flesh, like not any animals, not any plants, nothing. So I think we're quickly getting to the point where we'll have the technological capability to destroy ourselves and all life on Earth. And God created everything for a purpose, and that's not his purpose. That's not what he does.
Yeah.
He's trying to build something eternal. He's trying to build a body. And so I don't see, just with AI coming online, I'm pretty familiar with the advances in AI that are out in the world for everybody to see. And the advancements are happening way more rapidly now than they ever have. And based on that, I would say that the AI that's in the backs, with the quantum computing and stuff that's in the back rooms that we don't hear about, that stuff's probably really advancing. And I think that, we're looking at just a few years until that stuff is that could be what powers the beast system, is that type of level of AI and quantum computing.
Yeah.
So I think I've kind of been dancing around the time frame. I would say 3 to 5 years max, just before the AI is wanting to take over.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that happens, correlating that to the tribulation in the scriptures, that happens at least at the midpoint of the tribulation, right? When the whole beast system gets put in place and all the switches are flipped on, and it goes into effect. We have everyone has to bow down before the image, all that stuff.
Yeah. You have to wonder, because I can't remember if China already, if they said that they've already achieved quantum supremacy, or if that's something that's hasn't been achieved yet. I can't remember. I know that I've read articles about that, but so that's something that, whatever. So there's advancements that are definitely happening or soon to happen. And then you have people like Mark Zuckerberg that just recently he changed the name, I guess the name of the company to Meta. You saw that, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any feelings about that? I know you probably don't know a whole lot about it, but that it kind of struck me as odd, because meta, it means beyond. It means when you think of things that are metaphysical, it's something that's kind of outside of our reality, essentially. So meta, that's a very interesting word to choose to name your company. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and meta is overarching. It's the top down perspective. It's overall. So yeah, I have thoughts about that. They stole the name from someone, from a company, illegally.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they just straight up took it. They asked for it legally in a few ways, and the company was like, "I'm sorry, we're well-established business." So they just took it. So they really, really wanted this. So it was important to them for some reason. And I think, it's a big deal. I kind of deal with cryptocurrency stuff and the metaverse and digital assets, the digital realm. It's advancing really fast, and that's kind of where they want to take people. My thoughts on that are that the enemy wants to isolate people and get them fully controllable, and closer and closer to kind of what you see in the Matrix, just where people literally are physically isolated from one another, and they don't make physical contact very much with other people. And everything I see is moving humans further and further away from God's original intent for humanity. And that's by design. That's what the enemy wants to do. And he has a reason for doing it, which I won't even go into because it's probably beyond the scope of this video.
Yeah, it's really sad. But the good news is that we know that God wins. And if we're righteous, if we're keeping our covenants, that's more of a my church type concept, keeping covenants. If we're faithful, righteous will make it and accept Christ. So, but anyway, I wanted to go back really quick to Naftali Bennett. The thing that kind of struck me about him, okay, is before him he had Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was in office for 12 years.
Yeah.
12. It's like, how does that happen? I feel like just that by itself is some kind of indication of something. I don't know how it works, but I feel like it's significant. Recently they were doing they passed this budget for the government, and the article that I was reading said that it took them 3.5 years to reach that point. And obviously it's not like a 3.5 years from the scriptures, but it's almost like another type of weird, why it's just weird that they put that in the article. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's just little things like that.
There's a lot of little things like that.
Yeah. You had this guy, Yair Levi. He's a Levite. That he's the first one to have sung on the Temple Mount this year in 2,000 years. This year we have record numbers of Jews ascending the Temple Mount and just visiting and stuff. And just recently they had I guess it was a group of rabbis that were there to discuss Torah law, essentially, which was another one of these things that hadn't happened in 2,000 years. So it's just off the charts. And now at the end of Hanukkah, which is going to be next Monday, December 6th, they're going to be dedicating a new altar. They're going to do another kind of reenactment of consecrating the high priest and some other temple rituals. But they're dedicate. I don't know why they're dedicating a new one. I knew that they dedicated that first one, but I guess they're going to have a new one. But it's just so much movement, and it's so palpable. It feels like the third temple, talking about the third temple, it really feels like that's going to become a reality probably sooner than later. I don't know how, but do you have any thoughts on that? On the third temple, the Temple Institute, and all these things that they're doing?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts on it. I mean, I would say when I was a young believer and starting to awaken to prophecy elements, I got excited about the temple, and I was like, wow, this might happen someday. But it was honestly kind of like a pipe dream, I guess people would call it. But now it's far from a pipe dream. I mean, supposedly the Temple Institute has the ability to put that structure up in record time, just a matter of months. And they've already got the priests trained. They've got a lot of things in place. I think they still have yet to locate the red heifers that would be necessary for, the atonement to get the whole ball rolling. But I mean, that could happen in a heartbeat. They could just find some red heifers somewhere on Earth that meet the criteria, and it could happen. So yeah, that's all happened in my short lifetime, and now it's incredibly exciting to see that possibly coming to pass soon.
Yeah. That actually makes me think when I was reading about that altar, and it said that it was made in such a way where it meets the bare minimum standards to be kosher, and the purpose of which was so that it could be quickly transported up to the Temple Mount. And so maybe it has to do with that. I don't know how it would play out, but maybe once they find a red heifer, maybe that's why they want to be able to quickly move it up there and do that. But I mean, it's obviously all going to happen in the Lord's time, but I think a lot of us believe that time is imminent, right? It's imminent.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Let's see. And then another thing with Israel right now, we have 2 IDF generals that are in U.S. Central Command in Florida, and it's because right now there's also the talks going on in Vienna about this whole Iran situation, and they're trying to do a new nuclear deal. I feel like forever, or for like a long time, they've been talking about Iran and how like Iran is so close. Like, do you think that that's going to happen really soon, or do you think that it's just going to keep going on before something actually happens?
That's a tough question. I remember it was either 2009 or 10. I remember watching the news, and they were saying on there, the name Wolf Blitzer comes to my mind. I think he was a news guy, but
Yeah, for CNN. Yeah.
Yeah, they kept saying, "Oh, Iran is 6 months away from having a nuclear bomb," and that's a long time ago. That's more than 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
I know that there's going to be a conflict because it's written in the scripture. As far as timing, I think it probably is soon, because I see the cards have been dealt. It's all on the table. Everybody's got the cards in their hands. It's just time to start playing, So, so honestly, I mean, I'm not too afraid of giving a time frame on that. I think it's probably a matter of months it's definitely less than 2 years before Israel has to do something, but probably more like just months, if that,
Yeah. This is the general feeling that I have, not just with that, but like with all of it. It feels like having a jack in the box and winding it, and it's going to happen, and like it just keeps like going and going, and it's just like, when is this going to happen? Because like it's happening. It's just like it's almost like unsettling, because like it feels like things are like so sure for the near future, but it's just like, when? Like, I don't need to know when, but it's just like, I'm expecting things to happen. I think things are going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, since 2020, things have been happening crazy fast. I can't speak for you or anybody else, but for myself, it's kind of like, well, okay, I knew this stuff was all going to happen, but I didn't expect to see it all from the front row seat here. I kind of expected to be like with the Lord, like,
yeah.
It kind of feels like the beginning of the tribulation, and I'm still here. I know it's not. And as far as here in America, you're in the States, right?
Yeah, I'm in Kansas.
Okay, you're in Kansas. I'm in Oregon. We're pretty sheltered here. We've seen very little persecution and suffering and struggle. Although, if you're like homeless or you've been hit hard by this whole situation that's happened to us since 2020, then maybe you have suffered a lot. But I think the majority of Americans are still kind of we're in our little bubble, and we're not facing anything like they did in Afghanistan, where it was, I mean, they just were gone. One day they were there, and then the next day the church is just gone.
Yeah.
So, but I think that was God's mercy, and he had those people prepared and ready to face that, and he used the situation to wake people up globally and to paint a picture of, this is what's coming. Get yourself ready, get yourself right with me now while you have a chance. And that's going to happen more and more intensely as we move forward, until the day when the angel's flying around in the sky saying, "Don't take the mark of the beast." God's merciful in that way, but he uses persecution and martyrdom to push his kingdom forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes me think about something, like, because we know that it's like basically going to get to the point where the Lord is preaching his own sermons essentially through thunderings and earthquakes and all that stuff. And I feel like that's almost kind of happening. And this is kind of with my church specifically, but we're known for having missionaries and stuff. And an interesting thing that happened is that because of the pandemic, a lot of that missionary work stopped, and it's still like not doing that well. But because like there's been restrictions and stuff, but like there's been like a really big uptick in just like natural disasters. It feels like this was okay. It was this. I can't remember what month it was, or if it was the whole summer, but either there was like 1 month or the whole summer that was the hottest on record for the United States. You have the drought that's like happening kind of in your area, right? Up in the Pacific Northwest and the Western states. You have all these volcanoes going off. You have, I think Canary Islands are still going. We've had like some really large earthquakes this year. Like I know that we've at least had 2 that have been 8.0 or above, and then several other like higher up 7 range earthquakes. So it's like it makes me wonder, like, is the time kind of like over? Like it feels like there's been like a transition from the way that life used to be to like how it's going now.
Oh,
and yeah. So it's just like, it's just weird. It's like, it's surreal to me. That's how I feel. Like it's like I'm in an alternate reality compared to what I'm used to from life before. It's like bizarro world.
I think that I'm going to keep the sun from getting too crazy on me here, but I think that for people who have a biblical foundation and they know the Lord and they belong to Him, and they have a relationship with Him, for them, it's surreal, and we recognize that the transition period is now, and it's happened to some extent. But to the people who aren't saved and aren't believers, to them, they just want to get back to where they were, right? Because they think that we can, even though the people who are running this show said up front, Klaus Schwab, for example, they said it's never going back. We're never going back to the old normal, right? To the old ways. So a lot of people in the world are just in total denial, and that puts them in an extremely vulnerable position for deceit, for all kinds of. It's a setup for failure, because they're desperate. They're desperate inside. They just want to get back to that comfort that they had before, and modern culture doesn't really acknowledge death or mortality, because if it does, then you have to start questioning other things, right? And I think that's a big part of why this denial. Nobody wants to look at that. There's all this fear of death, but there's not really any facing of death.
Yeah. So just hopefully with those people that are in that mode, hopefully for their sake, when they have these tribulations with nature or the economy or whatever, hopefully it snaps them out of it and brings them to the Lord.
Exactly. That's what I see that He does. He's shaking things so that people will be awakened out of their slumber,
Mm-hmm.
And that's mercy, even though it looks harsh. I've been amazed at how few deaths there has been in the natural disasters in my state in the last several years. One really terrible tragedy, you were talking about the fires and stuff. During the summer, there was a town just north of here up in Canada, and it set the world record for Canada's highest temperature ever. And then after that happened, the next day, the whole town they had this crazy lightning storm, and the whole town just burned down, all of it. And nobody, hardly anybody escaped. It was really bad. Like lots of people burned alive. And I was really heartbroken over that, because it's close to home, I could have just been up there,
Yeah.
But those type of events wake people up.
Yeah. My mother-in-law, she lives up in do you know Coeur d'Alene, Idaho?
Yeah.
Yeah, she lives there, and I just like I've been there a number of times, and like to think of heat and wildfires like up there is just like something that another one of those really odd things this year when I saw that. Um, but as far as like, that town that got burned, it's like, that's not even the first time that it's happened within the last few years. Because the first one that I'm aware of really was that the Paradise Fire, well, not the Paradise Fire. That was called the Camp Fire, I think, and it destroyed Paradise, California, along with like a neighboring town, basically. And like that's kind of like I view that as almost like a kind of a biblical event, and the fact that it hasn't just been those two towns, but the one that you just talked about this year in California, there was Greenville, California, and then another smaller town called Grizzly Flats that likewise got burned to the ground. So I've done some videos on like the California wildfires because I was thinking that the Dixie Fire this year was going to become the largest of all time for California. The top 20 in California, the Dixie Fire only makes the number 2 spot. It's basically taken care of now. But when you go down that list of all 20 of those wildfires, all of them except for 2 have happened within this century. All of them except for 2. So wow. It's like, because we can talk about people that don't believe, that aren't Christian, but there's also people within the church and Christianity at wide and whatever you wanted to say that like it's almost like a lot of them are not even aware, and like because I know that that's like a topic that comes up on a lot of these channels. I watch you, I watch Steve Fletcher. There's like a number of other guys that I really like, but like it's this like problem that even within the community of believers, there's people that like don't seem to be aware of what's happening, and you have all these like things going on. Like, what do you think about that? Like these people that like just kind of, do you think that they're just like ignoring it? They don't want to think about it, or what do you think the issue is?
Well, I was finishing up Paul's epistles this week, and part of it struck me. I mean, I hate to even say this, but it talks about, there will come a time when people really won't endure sound doctrine, which prophecy would count there because that's like what 1/3 of the Bible. And they'll collect unto themselves people who will speak smooth words to them. They won't, tip the apple cart or rock the boat or whatever. They'll just basically like a modern version of back in Israel times where they would all the prophets would say, oh, nothing but good things are going to happen to the kingdom, and they would shun like Jeremiah or whoever else was prophesying a judgment. Well, I think that's where we're at now with a lot of the modern church, sadly. And I really do hate to say that, but I think that a lot of people just are pretending. They're not really, I don't know if I would say they're not really saved yet, but maybe they're not. I don't feel like I have the ability to say whether they are or they aren't, but I do have the ability to discern whether they're awake and aware or not. And Jesus really held people accountable to that in his day. Remember when he said, you hypocrites, you can read the sky and say that it's going to rain tomorrow, but you can't tell what's in front of you and what spiritual time is now, the time of your visitation. So to answer your question, people who are claiming to be believers and not seeing that, I mean, you got to question. Yeah, all you can do really is pray for them,
Yeah. I think there's like several groups of people, and you can probably even find this just in any organization. You have some people that don't really have like true principles, and they just like, but they're still part of an organization, whether it's a church or whatever, but they fake it. They do it because like it's either like a socially expedient thing to do, or they're getting attention or power or control. And I think that that was like the big problem with the Pharisees, is that they were born into this like Jewish culture. And so, you know, what do you do if you're someone that's looking for those things: control, power, attention, praise, validation, whatever? You know, you become like a rabbi, or you become a doctor of the law, and you use the church to like gain those things. And that, I think that's why Christ really was really upset at them, like using the church for popularity or for, you know, whatever. So I think there's that crowd. I think there's also kind of like a middle crowd that, like, you know, they're just not, they don't have much like backbone, and they're more susceptible to the soothsayers and kind of like what you were talking about. So there's probably like multiple issues, you know, when it comes to that, I'm sure. But okay, we're almost done here, but just maybe one more thing. Okay, so Trump and Biden, you know, do you feel like they somehow, whether it's the fact that they're just like a sign of the times, like, do you think that they're significant in relation to the second coming and how the last days play out?
Definitely, yeah. So it seems like America and Israel were kind of, and probably still are going through a time of leaderlessness. I'm trying to think of, there was a scripture that says, what, I can't think of it, if it's a psalm or what, but it talks about Israel being, God's kind of like mocking them and saying, what are you so upset about? Don't you have a leader? You know, that scripture was tied in with this time where, you know, they had all these elections over and over and over. I think that where we're at now in America is it's like parallels with Israel and America, because a lot of people, although I would say people on the more conservative side have kind of moved on and accepted, okay, well, this is what we have right now, and this is what we're going to have to deal with. At the same time, they don't really consider a whole lot of legitimacy to what's in place right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that both of the situation in America and the situation in Israel, because you had Netanyahu kind of fighting to stay in power for a long time and all that crazy stuff that was happening. It's like God was taking the power away from man and showing that he's sovereign, and whatever he wants to have happen will happen. And I think that it points people to him. Like it shook people up, because when you don't have a leader and you're not sure what's going on in your country, it gets scary, right? And you start questioning things, and you're like, well, where is my security? Is it really in the money that I've stored up? Is it in, you know, food and guns, or is it in, what is it in? Well, you know, in the end, it should be in the Lord, because he's our creator, and he's the one that fashioned us, and he's the only one that can preserve us, especially unto eternal life, not just in this world. So I think that the situation politically there with Trump and Biden and Ben and Netanyahu very much is designed by God to draw people unto himself while there's still time.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just like, it's more unprecedented stuff as well. Like, we've never had a president like Trump, certainly. And just everything that's going on with Biden, it's just like, it's just more craziness. And like, anyway, just, yeah, I like what you said. Well, let's wrap it up here. It's been an hour, so I really appreciate your time. I hope you have fun and you're able to do more of those trips soon. I'll be anxiously looking for those videos. I hope you and your family have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And you're always welcome to come back if you ever want to talk about these kind of things.
Yeah. Well, let me say a quick prayer for you and your family.
Okay.
Lord, I thank you for this time that Jared and I have had together, and all the watchers too that are viewing the videos. And I just pray for him and his family and his homestead, that you would bless it, God, and bless all the work of his hands and make him extremely fruitful. And we also ask that you would bless everyone who is watching right now, that you would touch every person's needs, especially those people that are suffering from physical ailments and emotional pain and loss and grief. Help them to process through it, God. And just be with us all, Lord, in these really trying times. Help us to remember that you are our only foundation and you are everything that's solid. So if we're planted and grounded and rooted in you, nothing can move us. So help us to remember that, because it's easy to forget. Just remember that we're little sheep, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. I love you, man. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too, brother.